organizers, but I'm going to speak to you tonight about the topic of mass incarceration and specifically how private prisons contribute to that. So this is a topic that I kind of stumbled into accidentally. I was at a wedding in Puglia, Italy, and sat next to a woman, and she found out what I was working on, this platform called Problematic. And once she did, she said, "Oh, you got to tackle this problem." So she explained it to me. She put me in touch with someone. I interviewed him on the podcast, and I couldn't unsee this problem once I saw it. So I'm gonna share it with you all tonight. And I recognize that this is not a European, it's not a Portuguese problem. This is something that is very unique to the US. And so I'm gonna share some stats with you actually, just to kind of table set here. So 2025, 1.8 million people incarcerated in the US. It's the country with the most incarcerated people in the world. We have 4.2% of global population in the US, and 20% of all incarcerated people are in the US. So it's pretty factor of 5x there. Per capita, 530 out of every 100,000 people in the US are imprisoned, versus Canada, which is 85 out of 100,000, and Germany, which is 69. So we're about 6x Canada and 7x Germany. So what is the deal? Like, why is this the case? I'm a huge fan of capitalism and entrepreneurship, and this is a scenario where the deeper I dug into it, the epiphany I had was that like, not everything should be privatized, and this is one of those things. So what are we talking about here? Like, why does this happen? So, and then the spend. So it's something like 80.7 billion, I think, is the total spent on imprisoning people in the US per year right now. And of that, 8% of that is private prisons. The 92% is public government stuff. So about 6.5 billion. And it's split between two public companies, one called Geo Group and one called Core Civic, and they together account for about 95%. So they are the dominant market players, and they're both publicly held companies. And so I think what it comes down to is when you put a profit motive around jailing a human being, then it changes things. Like going into it, I was thinking like, governments are usually inefficient, and so therefore privatizing things should make it better, should make it more efficient. You know, when they broke up the phone companies, you get better service, it's just better all around for everyone. And this is just one of those situations where I was just flat out wrong. The more I dug into it, the more I realized this is just not the case. So I interviewed this guy, Robbie Craig. I'll post a link to that podcast interview if you guys want to check it out. I'll put it in the Telegram group. And I also read this book called American Prison by Shane Bauer, this guy, journalist, who went undercover as a prison guard, and I think he was there for like 6 months and went through the whole thing. And it's an incredible story of just an average person like working as a prison guard in a private prison to see what the conditions are like. But I think it comes down to this idea of like the profit motive, and like once you have a pot of money and the incentives are there, and like Charlie Munger has this quote, "Show me the incentive and I'll show you the behavior." Once the incentives are there to make this attractive, then the issue is that these companies that have bags of money will pay lobbyists and they will make changes. So there's like, what are the levers you can pull as a private prison to influence? Because if you want to think of it, it's basically like a hotel business at the end of the day. And not only is it like a hotel business where you're trying to fill beds, but you can sell guaranteed occupancy contracts. And this is the nefarious thing about it, is that the government pays for it by pre-booking and ensuring like a 90% level of occupancy. And so once that exists, now they're basically incentivized to get their money's worth. And so you have laws that stiffen the sentencing and criminalize more activities. They're facing this slide now where things like marijuana are becoming decriminalized. And so they need to find other things to make illegal to fill the jails. I mean, it's just a crazy thing. And maybe like Europeans here, this is just like bonkers probably for you guys because you don't deal with this here. I don't believe it's an issue in Europe, but someone correct me if I'm wrong. But not to just like bring the mood down, because I think there's things we can do about it. So I kind of wanted to end with this a little bit more optimism. I started this platform called Problematic, and it was for precisely this type of thing. So we try to build like citizen community source projects that can attack what are called wicked problems, and this is one of them. And so we'll build stuff. At the end of that podcast interview, there's some really interesting ideas that Robbie put forth of things that we can build. It's largely an awareness issue. It's just making people aware that this problem exists. And then you have all these endowments and investments and companies like these mutual funds that buy the shares of these public companies, whereas I think if the average person knew what was happening, they would insist that this not be the case. So anyways, if this type of thing interests you, we do this. I now have monthly events. We actually work out of this space. And I think there's a couple really interesting projects we could build, and I'm happy to chat with anyone if this is of interest. So thank you for listening. Any questions?